Welcome to Audiorama Onda Lectora. Make yourself comfortable and listen. The Law of Attraction Unveiled. Mastering the Secrets of William Walker Atkinson. This audiobook discover the keys to manifesting your desires.
The Law of Attraction. William Walker Atkinson. Introduction. The universe is governed by one law, a very important law. Its manifestations are multiform, but considered from a fundamental point of view, it is clear that there is only one law. We know some of its manifestations, but we ignore everything about others. However, every day we learn a little more about them, and the veil is gradually being lifted. We speak intellectually of the law of gravitation, but we do not know that it, too, is a marvelous manifestation of the law of attraction. We are familiar with this marvelous manifestation of the law of attraction, which holds together the atoms of which matter is composed. We recognize the power of the law that attracts bodies to the earth, that holds the planets in place, but we close our eyes to the potent law that attracts to us, that which we desire or fear, that which creates or ruins our lives. When we realize that the thought is a force, a manifestation of energy, that has the magnetic power of attraction, we begin to understand the reason for many things, which until then, we did not know. There is no study that compensates the student more for the time invested than the study of the functioning of this powerful law of thought, the law of attraction. When we think, we transmit vibrations of a fine and ethereal substance, which are as authentic as the vibrations that manifest light, heat, electricity and magnetism. The fact that these vibrations are not evident to our five senses does not mean that they do not exist. A powerful magnet will send out vibrations, and will exert a force sufficient to attract to itself a piece of steel of 100 kilos, although we cannot see, taste, smell, hear, or feel that force. In the same way, the vibrations of thought cannot be seen, tasted, smelled, heard, or felt in the ordinary way. Although it is true that there are documented cases of people especially sensitive to psychic impressions, who have perceived powerful thought waves, and many of us can testify that we have clearly felt the thought vibrations of other people, both in the presence of the sender and at a distance. Telepathy and its associated phenomena are not nonsense. Light and heat manifest themselves through vibrations, of a much lower intensity than those of thought, but the difference lies only in the vibratory rate. The annals of science shed some light on this question. Elisha Gray says this in her book, The Miracles of Nature. There is much speculation about the existence of sound waves, which the human ear cannot pick up, as well as colored light waves, which the eye cannot perceive. The enormous, dark and mute space existing between 40,000 and 400 trillion vibrations per second, and the infinitude beyond 700 trillion vibrations per second, where light ceases, in the universe of motion, allows to abandon oneself to all kinds of speculations. M. Williams states, in his work entitled Short Chapters in Science, there is no gradation, between the ripples or tremors, more rapid produced by our sensation of sound, and the slower of them, which give way to our sensations of the most delicate warmth. There is a huge gap between them, large enough to include another world of motion, occupying a space between our world of sound and our world of warmth and light. Just as there is no reason good enough to suppose that matter is incapable of intermediate activity of that kind, to imagine that such activity could not give way to sensations of another kind, provided there are organs which collect and feel their movements. I quote these authorities only to offer ideas on which to reflect, and not with the intention of proving the existence of thought vibrations. This last fact has already been fully demonstrated, to the satisfaction of numerous researchers in that field, and a little reflection will confirm to you that it coincides with your own experiences. We often hear the well-known statement of mental science that thoughts are things, and we utter these words without saying anything about them. And we utter these words without consciously understanding what they really mean. If we fully understood the truth of that statement, and the natural consequences of truth that support it, we could understand many things, which are so far obscure to us, and use the wonderful energy of thought force, just as we use any other energetic manifestation. As I have already said, when we think, we set in motion vibrations of movement of a very high level, just as real as the vibrations of light, heat, sound and electricity. And when we understand the laws, which govern the production and transmission of these vibrations, we can use them in our daily lives, just as we do with other more familiar forms of energy. The fact that we cannot see, hear, weigh or measure these vibrations does not prove that they do not exist. There are sound waves that no human ear can hear, although some of them are undoubtedly registered by the ear of some insects, and others are captured by very sensitive instruments, invented by humans. However, there is a huge gap between the sounds recorded by the most sensitive instruments, and the limit that the human mind, reasoning by analogy, considered as the line of separation between sound waves and other forms of vibrations. There are light waves, which the human eye does not register, some of which can be picked up by the most sensitive instruments, as well as there are others much more subtle, which still cannot be detected, due to lack of appropriate instruments. Although each year new advances are made, and the unexplored terrain is gradually decreasing, the invention of new instruments makes hitherto unknown vibrations appear. However, these vibrations were as real before the invention of the instrument as they were afterwards. Suppose we lack instruments to record magnetism, one might feel justified in denying the existence of this powerful energy, since it could not be tested, felt, smelled, heard, seen, weighed or measured. However, the magnet still sends out waves of sufficient force, as to attract to itself pieces of metal, which can weigh hundreds of kilos. Each form of vibration requires its own type of instrument to record it. At present, the human brain seems to be the only instrument capable of recording thought waves, although occultists believe that scientists will soon invent devices sensitive enough to pick up and record such signals. And from the information available to us at the present time, it appears that such an invention will soon be forthcoming. But those who have experimented in the field of practical telepathy require no further demonstration than the results of their own experiments. We send out thoughts of greater or lesser intensity continuously, reaping their results. Our thought waves not only influence us and others, but they have a power of attraction. They attract to us other people's thoughts, things, circumstances, and people, according to the character of the dominant thought in our minds. Those of love will attract to us the love of others, circumstances, and environment according to the thought, as well as like-minded people. Those of anger, hatred, envy, malice, and jealousy will attract to us the foul breath of like thoughts emanating from the minds of other people, circumstances in which we will be compelled to manifest those vile thoughts, and to receive them also from other individuals, who will manifest disharmony, and so forth. An intense or long-held thought will make us the center of attraction of the corresponding thought waves of other people. In the world of thought, analogues attract each other, and we reap what we sow. In the world of thought, birds of similar plumage fly together, curses come home to roost, like birds, and do so accompanied by friends who resemble them. The human being full of love, perceives love everywhere, and attracts the love of others. The human being who harbors hatred in his heart, receives all the hatred he can bear. The human being who thinks of fighting, usually fights against everything he can until he overcomes it. And so with everyone receives what he asks for, through the wireless telegraphy of the mind. Who wakes up in the morning feeling in a bad mood, usually gets the whole family in the same mood, before finishing breakfast. The fastidious woman usually faces throughout the day, with everything, which can feed her fastidious propensity. This question of thought attraction is a serious matter. When you think about it enough, you realize that a person creates his own circumstances, even if he blames it on others. I have known people who have understood this law, and who maintain a calm and positive thought, and are not affected in any way by the disharmony that may surround them. These people are like the vessel from which oil is poured into troubled waters. They remain serene and calm, while the storm rages around them. When one has understood the functioning of the FA, one is not at the mercy of the capricious storms of thought. We have passed through the age of physical force to the age of intellectual supremacy, and now we are entering an almost unknown field, that of psychic energy. This field has its own laws, and we must become familiar with them, or else they will overtake us, as happens to those who are ignorant of the planes of effort. I will try to make clear to you the important principles which underlie this new field of energy open to us, so that you may utilize this great energy, and apply it for legitimate and worthy purposes, just as man today uses steam, electricity, and other forms of energy. Chapter 1. Thought waves and their process of reproduction. Thought produces waves, which spread over the great ocean of thought, just as when a stone is thrown into the water. But there is a difference. The waves on the water move in all directions, but in a single plane, whereas the waves of thought move in all directions from a common center, as do the rays of the sun. Just as here, on earth, we are surrounded by a great sea of air, we are also surrounded by a great sea of mind. Our thought waves move through this vast mental ether, extending in all directions, and as I have already said, diminishing in intensity depending on the distance traveled, because of the friction caused by their coming into contact with the great body of mind which surrounds us on all sides. These thought waves have different qualities than the waves on water. They have the ability to self-reproduce. In this sense, they are more similar to sound waves than to waves on water. Just as a note on the violin makes the finest crystal vibrate and sound, so an intense thought tends to awaken similar vibrations in minds attuned to receive it. Many of the erratic thoughts that come to us are nothing more than reflections of vibrations in response to certain intense thoughts sent by another person. But unless our minds are tuned to receive it, the thought is not likely to affect us. If we hold high and important thoughts, our minds acquire a certain tonality, corresponding to the character of the thoughts we have been having. And once this tonic is established, we will be in a position to pick up the vibrations of other minds, modulated with respect to the same thought. On the other hand, we have but to habituate ourselves to holding thoughts of an opposite character, and we will soon reflect the tone of the thoughts emanating from the minds of thousands of others who think similar things. We are largely what we have thought, and the balance is represented by the character of the suggestions and thoughts of others, which have come to us either directly, through verbal suggestions, or telepathically, through those thought waves. But our general mental attitude determines the character of the thought waves received from others, as well as the thoughts emanating from ourselves. We receive only those thoughts, which are in harmony with the general mental attitude we hold. Those which are not in harmony affect us very little, for those thoughts do not awaken any response in us. He who firmly believes in himself, and maintains an intense positive mental attitude of confidence, coupled with determination, is not likely to be affected by adverse and negative thoughts of discouragement and failure, which may emanate from the minds of others, in which they predominate. At the same time, these negative thoughts, if they reach someone whose mental attitude is tuned to a lower tonality, will deepen his negative state and add fuel to the fire that consumes his energy, or if you prefer another analogy, will serve to extinguish the fire of his energy and activity. We attract the thoughts of others of the same order. He who thinks of success will tune into the minds of others who think alike, and they will help him, as he helps them. He who allows his mind to dwell constantly on thoughts of failure, approaches the minds of other, unsuccessful, people, and each of them will tend to be as helpful to him as he is to them. And each of them will tend to bring the others down further. Whoever thinks that everything is bad, is apt to see much evil, and will come in contact with others who will seem to prove his theory. And he who looks for the good in everything and everyone, is likely to attract things and people, which correspond to that way of thinking. Generally, we see what we look for. You can develop this idea more clearly, if you think of radio sets, which receive vibrations, only from the station that is tuned to the same wave, while other signals, passing through the air very close without affecting the receiving apparatus. The same law can be applied to the operations of thought. We receive only that which corresponds to our mental tuning. If we feel discouraged, we may rest assured that we have fallen into a key, a negative tone, and that not only will we be affected by our own thoughts, but that we will also receive equally depressing thoughts of a similar kind, which are constantly emitted by the minds of other unfortunates, who have not yet learned of the existence of the law of attraction. And if we ever rise to the heights of enthusiasm and energy, it will not be long before we will feel the influx of spirited, bold, energetic and positive thoughts sent forth by the men and women of the world. We can recognize this circumstance without much effort, when we come into personal contact with people, and feel their vibrations, depressing or stimulating, as the case may be. When we are not in their presence, the same law also operates, although with less intensity. The mind has many tonalities, from the highest positive note, to the lowest negative note, and many other intermediate notes, varying in tonality, according to their respective distance from the positive or negative end. When your mind operates in positive terms, you feel strong, lively, luminous, content, happy, confident and courageous, and you can perform your work well, carry out your intentions and progress toward success. You emit intense positive thoughts, which affect other people, getting them to cooperate with you or follow your leadership, depending on their own mental tonality. When you play on the negative end of the mental keyboard, you feel depressed, weak, passive, dazed, fearful and cowardly. You find yourself unable to progress or succeed, and your effect on others is practically nil. You are dragged down by them, instead of leading them, and the most positive people treat you like a rag. In some individuals, the positive element seems to predominate, while in others, the negative tendency seems to be more evident. But of course, the degrees of positivity and negativity vary greatly, and B may be negative for A, while for C, it is positive. When two people meet, there is usually a silent mental conflict, in which their respective minds check their quality of positivity, and establish their relative position to each other. This process may be unconscious in many cases, nevertheless, it is something that happens. The adjustment is usually automatic, but occasionally the struggle is so acrimonious, the opponents fit together so well, that the issue makes its way into the consciousness of both people. Sometimes the two parties are so alike in their degree of positivity, that they fail to come to a mental agreement, they cannot make friends with each other, and feel mutually repelled and separated, or else they remain together amidst disputes and constant bickering. We are positive or negative, for all those with whom we establish contact. We can be positive for our children, our employees and dependents, but at the same time we are negative for others, with respect to whom we occupy inferior positions, or whom we have allowed to impose themselves on us. Of course, something can happen, and suddenly we become more positive than the man or woman to whom we were negative. Cases of this kind are quite frequent. And when the knowledge of these mental laws becomes more widespread, we will see more cases of people asserting themselves, using their newfound energy. But remember, you have the power to raise the tone of your mind to a positive tone, thanks to willpower. And of course, it is also true that you can let yourself fall into a low, negative tone through laziness or a weak will. There are more people in the negative plane of thought than in the positive, and therefore in our mental atmosphere, there are more negative thought vibrations. But fortunately for us, this is balanced by the fact that a positive thought is infinitely more powerful than a negative one, and if through willpower, we raise ourselves to a higher mental tone, we can shut out depressing thoughts, and accept the vibrations that correspond to our new mental attitude. This is one of the secrets of the affirmations and autosuggestions used by the various schools of mental science and other new thought approaches. Affirmations in themselves are without merit, but they have a twofold purpose. First, they tend to establish new mental attitudes in us, and are great for character development, the science of self-transformation. And secondly, they tend to raise the mental tone, so that we can benefit from the positive thought waves of others on the same plane of thought. Whether we believe in them or not, we are always making affirmations. He who asserts that he can do something, and asserts it congenitally, develops in himself the qualities that facilitate the attainment of it, and at the same time, places his mind in the right tone, to receive the thought waves that might help him to achieve it. If on the other hand, one says and feels that he is going to fail, he will only drown and suffocate the thoughts coming from his own subconscious mentality, which is intended to help him, tuning himself to the thought of failure in the world, and I can assure you that it is something that abounds right now. We must not let the adverse and negative thoughts of those around us affect us. We must rise to the higher chambers of the mental abode, and tune into a higher tone, above the vibrations of the lower planes of thought. Then you will not only be immune to their negative vibrations, but you will come into contact with the important body of intense positive thought coming from those who occupy the same plane of development as yourself. My aim will be to direct and train you in the proper use of thought and will, so that you may use them well, and be able to strike the positive note at any time you may deem necessary. It is not that you have to play the highest note all the time. It is best to stay at a comfortable pitch, without much effort, and to have the means to be able to raise that pitch when the occasion calls for it. By means of this knowledge, you will not be at the mercy of the old automatic action of the mind, but it will be under your control. The development of the will is much like the development of a muscle, it is only a matter of practice and gradual improvement. At the beginning it is normal that it is tiring, but with each new attempt, one gains more energy, making this new strength become real and permanent. Many of us have become positive when we find ourselves in extraordinary or urgent situations. We are in the habit of pulling out all the stops when the occasion calls for it. But through intelligent practice, the will be reinforced in such a way that your usual state will be equivalent to that of drawing strength from weakness, and then, when you think it necessary to apply the reinforcement, you can reach a position that now you cannot even imagine. Do not think that I am advocating that you are in a permanent state of high tension. Not at all, besides it is not desirable, and not only because it is tiring, but also because sometimes you will find it necessary to loosen the tension and become receptive in order to absorb impressions. It is necessary to be able to relax, and to assume a certain degree of receptivity, knowing that you are always in a position to recover, and to adopt a more assertive state, as you wish. The person who is always very assertive, misses out on a lot of enjoyment and relaxation. By being assertive you express yourself, by being receptive you accept impressions. By being assertive you are a teacher, by being receptive you become a student. It is not only good to be a good teacher, but it is also important to be a good listener. Chapter 2. Talk about the mind. The human being has only one mind, but he has many mental faculties, and each one of them is capable of functioning in two different directions of mental effort. There are no clear lines of separation dividing the various functions of a faculty, but they overlap each other, like the colors of the spectrum. An active force of any faculty of the mind is the result of a direct impulse, and transmitted at the moment of effort. A passive effort of any faculty of mind is the result of an active effort, coming from the same mind of an active effort of another mind, following a suggestion of the thought vibrations of the mind of another person, or of thought impulses of an ancestor. The latter are transmitted by the laws of heredity, including impulses transmitted from generation to generation, from the time of the original vibratory impulse, transmitted by the first cause, whose impulses unfold and develop, when the proper state of evolutionary development is reached. The active effort is a newborn, fresh and newly arrived, while the passive effort is of less recent creation, and in fact is usually the result of vibratory impulses transmitted in past ages. The active effort makes its way, pushing aside the branches that impede its path, and the stones that stand in its way. The passive effort runs through the beaten paths. An impulse of thought, or impulse to move, caused at first by an active effort or faculty, may, by repetition or habit, become strictly automatic, and gain momentum from the impetus developed by a repeated active effort, which propels it forward, in passive terms, until it is arrested by another active effort, or else changes direction by the same cause. On the other hand, thought impulses, or movement impulses that run in passive terms, can be terminated or corrected by an active effort. The active function creates, changes or destroys. The passive function continues the work initiated by the active function, and obeys orders and suggestions. The active function produces the thought pattern or movement pattern, to which it imparts its vibrations, which thereafter drive it in passive terms. The active function also has the power to emit vibrations, which neutralize the impulse of the thought pattern or movement pattern. Likewise, it can launch a new thought pattern or movement pattern, with more intense vibrations, which overcomes and absorbs the first thought or movement, replacing it with a new one. Once they initiate their missions, all thought impulses or movement impulses continue to vibrate in passive terms until they are corrected or periclitated by subsequent impulses transmitted by the active function or other controlling power. The continuity of the original impulse gives it impetus and force, hindering its correction or termination. This explains what is called the force of habit or habit. I think it will be better understood by those who have striven to overcome a habit they acquired easily. The law can be applied to both good and bad habits. The inherent moral is obvious. Sometimes, several of the faculties of the mind combine to produce a single manifestation. A task, to be accomplished, may require the combined exercise of several faculties, some of which may be manifested in active effort, and others by passive effort. The appearance of new circumstances, new problems, requires the exercise of active effort, while a familiar problem or task may be easily handled by passive effort, without the aid of its more dynamic sibling. In nature, there is an instinctive tendency in living organisms to perform certain actions, the tendency of an organized body to seek that which satisfies its cravings. This tendency is sometimes called appetence. In reality, it is a passive mental impulse, which has its origin in the impetus imparted by the first cause, and transmitted throughout evolutionary development, accumulating strength and energy as it proceeds. The impulse of the first cause is reinforced by the powerful upward attraction exerted by the Absolute. It is very easy to note this tendency in the vegetable kingdom, from the minor exhibits in the lower types, to the major ones in the higher types. It is what is usually called the vital force in plants. However, it is a manifestation of rudimentary intellect ion, functioning in accordance with passive effort. In some of the higher forms of plant life, there appears a slight coloring of that vital action, a faint indication of volitional choice. Authors of works on plant life have already written remarkable examples of this phenomenon. Without any doubt, it is an exhibition of a rudimentary active intellect ion. In the lower animal kingdom, a very high degree of passive mental effort can be found. And, varying in degree depending on the various families and species, a considerable amount of active intellect ion is also apparent. There is no doubt that the lower animal possesses reason, and only to a lesser degree than the human being. In fact, the demonstration of volitional intellect ion exhibited by an intelligent animal is usually as high as that demonstrated by lower types of human beings, or small children. Just as a child, before birth, shows in its body the stages of physical evolution of the human being, it also manifests, before and after birth and until maturity, the stages of mental evolution of the human being. The human being, the highest form of life produced so far, or at least on this planet, shows to have the highest form of passive intellect ion, and a much higher development of active intellect ion, than can be seen in lower animals. And yet, the degrees of that power vary widely among the different human races. The different degrees of active intellect ion are evident among men of the same race, those degrees, in no way dependent on the amount of culture, social position, or educational advantages possessed by them. The mental culture and mental development are two very different things. We have only to look around us, to become aware of the different stages of development, of active intellectation in the human being. The reasoning of many human beings is little more than passive intellectation, demonstrating few qualities of volitional thinking. They prefer to let other human beings think for them. Active intellectation tires them, and they find passive mental processing, which is instinctive and automatic, much easier. Their minds operate along the lines of least resistance. They are little more than human sheep. Among the lower animals, and the lower types of human beings, active intellectation is, above all, confined to the grosser faculties, and to the more material plane. In them the higher mental faculties operate along the instinctive and automatic lines of the passive function. With the progress of the lower forms of life in the evolutionary scale, they developed new abilities, which were latent in them. These faculties always manifested themselves in the form of rudimentary passive functioning, and then developed into higher passive forms, until the active functions came into action. The evolutionary process continues with a steady tendency towards the development of higher active intellectation. This evolutionary progress is brought about by the vibratory impulse imparted by the primal cause, aided by the upward pull of the Absolute. The law of evolution continues to advance, and the human being begins to develop new powers of mind which, of course, first manifest themselves in the field of passive effort. Some people have developed these new faculties, to a considerable degree, and it may not be long before man will be able to exercise them, following the principles of their active functions. In fact, this power has already been realized by a few. That is the secret of the Eastern occultists, and of some of their Western brethren. The docility of the mind to the will can be increased by a properly directed practice. What we call strengthening the will is actually training the mind to recognize and absorb the power within. The will is strong enough, it does not need to be strengthened, but the mind must be trained to receive and act upon the suggestions of the will. The will is the external manifestation of the I Am. The flow of the will runs in full power through the spiritual wiring, but you must learn how to raise the trolley to touch this wiring before the mental trolleybus can be set in motion. This is a different idea from that generally received from writers who speak of willpower, but it is correct, and it is one which you can prove to yourself if you make the right experiments in the right way. The attraction of the Absolute propels the human being upward, and the vibratory force of the primal impulse is not yet exhausted. The hour of evolutionary development has arrived, in which the human being can help himself. He who understands the law can work wonders, thanks to the development of the powers of the mind, while he who turns his back on the truth will suffer because of his lack of knowledge of the law. He who understands the laws of his mental being, develops his latent powers, and uses them intelligently. He who does not despise his passive mental functions, but employs them also, charges them with the tasks for which they are best adapted, and can obtain marvelous results from his work, provided he has mastered and trained them, in order to launch himself toward the higher self. When they fail to perform their task properly, that human being regulates them, and his knowledge prevents him from interfering with them foolishly, avoiding all harm. He develops the latent faculties and powers within him, and learns how to manifest them according to intellectation, both active and passive. He knows that the authentic human being within himself is the master of which both active and passive functions are but tools. He has banished fear from himself, and enjoys freedom. He has found himself. He has realized the secret of I Am. Chapter 3. To build the mind. The human being can build his mind, and make of it what he wishes. In fact, we do nothing but build the mind at every moment of our life, both consciously and unconsciously. Most of us do it unconsciously, but those who can see a little below the surface of things, take charge of the matter, and become conscious creators of their own mentality. They are no longer subject to the suggestions and influences of others, for they are now masters of themselves. They affirm the I. and impose obedience to the subordinate mental faculties. The I is the sovereign of the mind, and what we call will is the instrument of the I. Behind all this there is something else, of course, and the universal will is higher than the will of the individual, although the latter maintains a much closer contact than is generally supposed with the universal will, and when the lower self is conquered, and the I is affirmed, a very close contact is established with the universal will, and when the lower self is conquered, and the I is affirmed, a very close contact is established with the I. When the lower self is conquered, and the I is affirmed, a very close contact is established with the universal will, so as to participate in its marvelous power. The moment the I is affirmed, and one finds oneself, the I is affirmed, the I is affirmed. And one finds oneself, an intimate connection is established. An intimate connection is established between the individual will and the universal will. But before a person can make use of the enormous energy placed at his disposal, he must succeed in mastering the lower self. Think of the absurdity of the human being, proclaiming that he manifests potencies, when in reality he is the slave of the lower parts of his mental being, which must be subordinated. Think of a human being, slave of his humors, passions, animal appetites and lower faculties, and who at the same time, tries to proclaim the benefits of the will. I am not preaching asceticism, which to me seems a confession of weakness. I am speaking of self-mastery, of the reaffirmation of the I above the subordinate parts of the will. Above the subordinate parts of oneself. From a higher point of view, this I is the only real being, and the rest is the insert, but the space at my disposal does not permit me to deal with this question, and I shall therefore use the word being to refer to the whole human being. Before a human being can reaffirm the I completely, he must achieve absolute control of the subordinate parts of the self. All things are beneficial when we learn to master them, but there is no good when they master us. As long as we allow the lower parts of the self to order us around, we are their slaves. Only when our I ascends to its throne and lifts the scepter, is order established, and things assume the proper relationship to each other. I am not saying that there is anything catastrophic in those who are dominated by their lower selves, they are at a lower level of evolution, and will rise in due course. What I am doing, is to call the attention of those who are already here, so that the sovereign must reassert his will, and the subjects obey. There are orders to be given and executed. The rebellion must be crushed, and competent authority reinstated. And the time to do so is now. You have consented, that your rebellious subjects keep the king from his throne. You have been allowing the mental realm to suffer the misrule of irresponsible faculties. You have been slaves to appetite, unworthy thoughts, passions and negativity. The will has been set aside, and the lower desire has usurped the throne. It is time to re-establish order in the mental realm. You are able to reassert your control over any emotion, appetite, passion or thought, all through the reassertion of the will. You can command fear to recede, jealousy to leave your presence, hatred to disappear from your sight, anger to hide, and worry to cease to bother you. You can get the uncontrolled appetite and passion to submit, and become humble slaves instead of masters, and all this, thanks to the reaffirmation of the I. In the same way, you can now surround yourselves with the glorious company of courage, love and self-control. You can crush rebellion and establish peace and order in your mental realm, provided you express the command and insist on its execution. Before becoming an empire, you must establish the right internal conditions. You must demonstrate your ability to rule your own kingdom. The first battle is the conquest of the lower self, by the true self. Affirmation. I reaffirm the control of my true self. Repeat these words ardently and positively, during the day, and at least once every hour, but especially, when you are faced with conditions that tempt you, so that you act upon the dictates of the lower self, rather than upon the directions transmitted by the true self. In moments of doubt and indecision, Utter these words with ardor, and the way ahead will be cleared for you. Repeat them several times after you go to bed before you sleep. But be sure to back them up with the thought that inspires them, and not just parrot them. From the mental image of the true self, reasserting its control over the lower planes of your own mind, behold the king on his throne. You will become aware of an influx of new thoughts, and things that seemed difficult to you before will now become much easier. You will feel that you have control in your hands, and that you are the master, and not the slave. The thought you hold will manifest itself in action, and you will grow into what you have in mind. Exercise. Concentrate the mind firmly on the higher self, and draw inspiration from it, when you feel that you are going to yield to the instigations of the lower part of your nature. When you feel tempted to burst out in anger, reaffirm the I, and the tone of your voice diminish. And the tone of your voice will diminish. Anger is unworthy of the developed self. When you feel vexed, remember what you are, and rise above the feeling. When you feel fear, remember that the true self fears nothing, and assert courage. When you feel the incitement of jealousy, think of your higher nature, and just laugh. You must reaffirm the true self, and not allow yourself to be disturbed by elements from the lower plane of mentality. They are unworthy of you, and you must show them their place. Do not allow these things to dominate you, they should be your subjects, not your masters. You must remove yourself from that plane, and the only way to do this is to remove yourself from those phases of thought, which do nothing more than fit things in, so that they will fit their own minds. To fit your desires. You may find it difficult at first, but insist, and you will get that satisfaction, which only comes when the lower parts of our nature are conquered. You have been a slave for long enough, now is the time to free yourself. If you perform these exercises faithfully, at the end of the year you will be a different being, and you will look back, devoting a compassionate smile to your former state. But this requires some effort. It is not a task for children, but for enthusiastic men and women. Will you make the effort? Chapter 4. The Secret of the Will. Although psychologists may differ in their theories, as to the nature of the will, none deny its existence or question its power. All people recognize the power of a strong will, and all know that it can be used to overcome the greatest obstacles. But few realize that the will is something that can be developed and strengthened by intelligent practice. They believe that they can achieve wonders with a strong will, but instead of trying to develop it, they content themselves with vain regrets. They sigh without doing anything else. Those who have investigated the subject in depth know that willpower, with all its latent possibilities and great potencies, can be developed, disciplined, controlled and directed, just like any other of nature's forces. It does not matter what theory you want to adopt about the nature of the will, because you will end up getting results, provided you practice intelligently. Personally, I hold a rather strange theory about will. I believe that every human being has, potentially, a strong will, and that all he has to do is to train his mind to use it. I am convinced that in the higher regions of the mind of all human beings, there is a great repository of willpower, waiting to be used. The current of will runs through a psychic wiring, and all that needs to be done, is to raise the mental trolley to bring the energy down, and so use it. And the supply is unlimited, for your little battery is connected with the great powerhouse of universal willpower, whose energy is inexhaustible. Your will does not need training, but your mind does. The mind is the instrument, and the supply of willpower is proportionate to the excellence of the instrument through which it is manifested. You need not accept this theory if you do not like it. This lesson will fit your own theory as well as mine. Whoever develops his mind, allowing willpower to be transmitted through it, will have opened up wonderful possibilities before him. Not only will he have found a great power within his grasp, but he will be able to utilize faculties, talents and abilities, the existence of which he had not even imagined. This secret of the will is the magic key that opens all doors. Donald G. Mitchell once wrote, "Resolution is what manifests a man, but not a weak resolution, but a barefaced determination, no erratic resolutions, but that strong and indefatigable will, which surmounts difficulties and dangers, just like a boy advancing through the frozen lands of winter, which lights up his eyes and brain with a proud throbbing, hurling himself towards the unattainable. The will turns men into giants." Many of us feel that if we could exercise our will, we could do wonders. But for some reason it seems that in any case, we do not want to take the trouble, and we do not reach the real turning point. We put it off again and again, we talk vaguely about someday. But that day never comes. We instinctively feel the power of the will, but we lack the energy to exercise it, and so we let ourselves be carried along by the flow, unless some difficulty arises, some useful obstacle stands in our way, or some kindly pain pushes us into action. In those cases, we are forced to reaffirm our will, and with that, we begin to get results. The problem is that we do not want anything to end up forcing us to exercise our willpower. We do not want to make an effort. We are mentally lazy, and of weak desire. If you don't like the word desire, replace it with aspiration. Some people call lower impulses desires, and higher impulses aspirations. It's a matter of words, so choose whichever you prefer. That's where the problem lies. Let a person in danger of losing his life, or a woman about to lose a great love, and you will witness an amazing display of willpower, coming from an unexpected source. Let a woman's child be threatened by danger, and you will see how she manifests a degree of courage and willpower that sweeps away anything that comes her way. And yet, that same woman will groan before a domineering husband, and lack the will to perform a simple task. A boy will do all sorts of chores if he considers them a game, but he can hardly force himself to chop a bit of firewood. A strong will follows in the wake of an intense desire. If you really want to do something, you usually have to develop the willpower to do it. The problem lies in the fact that you don't really want any of these things, and yet you blame it on your lack of willpower. You say you want to do it, but if you think about it, you would see that you really want to do something else. You are not willing to pay the price to get it. Stop for a moment and analyze this statement, and apply it to your own case. You are mentally lazy, that's the problem. Don't tell me about lacking the willpower. You have a large repository of willpower waiting for you to use it, but you are too lazy to do so. Now, if you really care about this issue, get to work, and first of all, find out what it is you really want to do, and then get to work and do it. Don't worry about willpower, you will have all the willpower you want whenever you need it. The point is to get to that point where you will decide to do it. That is the real test, the resolution. Think about this for a while, and decide if you really want to be a willful person with enough will to get to work. Many excellent essays and books have been written on this subject, and all agree in recognizing the greatness of willpower, using the most enthusiastic terms. But few have said anything about how those who do not possess it, or possess it, but to a limited degree, can acquire this strength. Some have offered exercises with a view to strengthening the will, which in reality what they do is to strengthen the mind, so that it can draw upon its store of energy. But generally, they have overlooked the fact that it is in autosuggestion that the secret of the development of the mind is to be found, so that it may become an effective instrument of the will. Autosuggestion. I use my willpower. Repeat these words several times, stubbornly and positively, immediately after finishing this section. Then, repeat them frequently throughout the day, at least once every hour, and especially, when you are faced with something, which requires you to exercise willpower. Repeat it also several times when you lie down to sleep. Now, these words will mean nothing unless you back them up with thought. In fact, the thought is everything, and the words are only clamps on which the thought hangs. So think about what you are saying, and feel conscious of what you are saying. At first you will have to have faith, and use the words, with a confident expectation of the result. Hold the thought you are shaping in the storehouse of willpower, and before long, you will find that thought taking shape in action, and your willpower manifesting. You will feel a surge of energy every time you repeat those words. You will see yourself overcoming difficulties and bad habits, and you will be amazed at the degree of softness, which shows everything that comes out of you. Exercise. Carry out at least one unpleasant task a day, for a month. If there is one that you particularly dislike, and that you prefer to avoid, that is precisely the one you will do. It is not a question of sacrificing yourself or taming yourself, or anything of the sort, it is a question of exercising your will. Anyone can do that which pleases him with joy, but to carry out joyfully that which displeases us, will is necessary, and this is how you must carry out the task. You will see how it is a most valuable discipline. Try it for a month, and you will see how far you get. If you shirk this exercise, the best thing is for you to stop here, and acknowledge that you do not want willpower, that you are content to be as you are, and remain a weakling. Chapter 5. Immunizing yourself against harmful thought attraction. The first thing to do is to eliminate fear and worry. Fearful thinking is the cause of much unhappiness and many failures. I know you have heard it many times, but it is worth repeating. Fear is a mental habit which has been pinned on us through negative thinking. Great expectations are a very powerful magnet. Whoever harbors intense and confident desires attracts the things that will help him or her, people, objects, circumstances and environments, as long as he or she desires them hopefully, confidently, with security and tranquility. And it is also true that those who fear something usually manage to set forces in motion that will bring about the very thing they fear. In reality, the one who fears really expects what he fears, and in the eyes of the law, it is the same as if he had really wished for it. The law operates in both cases, since the principle is the same. The best way to overcome the habit of fear is to assume the mental attitude of courage, for the best way to get rid of the darkness is to allow the light to enter. To fight against a negative thought pattern, recognizing its strength, and trying to deny it by intense efforts, is a waste of time. The best, safest, easiest and quickest method is to assume the existence of the positive thought, desired instead, and by constantly dwelling on the positive thought, it will manifest in objective reality. To overcome fear, one has to hold firmly to the mental attitude of courage. He must think courage, say courage and act courageously. He must keep the mental image of courage before him at all times until it becomes the normal mental attitude. Keep the ideal firmly before you, and little by little, you will achieve its realization, the ideal will become manifest. Let the word courage sink deep into your mind, and then hold it there firmly, until the mind holds it where it belongs. Think of yourself as courageous, and consider that you act courageously in delicate situations. Understand that there is nothing to fear, that worry and fear never helped, and never will help anyone. Understand that fear paralyzes effort, and that courage encourages activity. The confident, bold, hopeful human being who says, "I can do it and I will succeed," is a very powerful magnet. He attracts to himself just what he needs to achieve success. Things seem to come his way, and people say he is lucky. That's nonsense. Luck has nothing to do with it. It all lies in the mental attitude. And the mental attitude of the human being who says, "I can't," or "I'm afraid," or "I'm afraid," or "I am afraid," also determines the measure of success. Also determines the measure of success. There is no mystery about it. You only have to look around to understand the truth of what I have just said. Have you ever met a lucky person who lacked the thought, "I can do it and I will succeed," deeply embedded within him or her? He will overtake the "I can't" human being, even though he may have the "I can't" thought. The "I can't" human being, although the "I can't" human being may have more ability and capacity. The first mental attitude brings latent qualities to the surface and attracts help from the outside, while the second mental attitude not only attracts "I can't" people and things, but also prevents that "I can't" from coming to the surface. But also prevents that human being from manifesting his or her own powers. I have demonstrated the correctness of these views, as have many others, and the number of people who are aware of this is increasing day by day. Do not waste your thought force, use it to benefit from it. Stop attracting failure, unhappiness, disharmony and sorrow. Start now and emit a stream of bright, positive and happy thoughts. Let your main thought be, "I can do it, and I will get it." Think, "I can do it and I will get it." Think, "I can do it and I will make it." Dream, "I can do it and I will make it." Dream, "I can do it, and I will do it." Dream, "I can do it, and I will do it." Say, "I can do it and I will do it." Say, "I can do it and I will get it," and do, "I can do it and I will get it." And do, "I can do it, and I will get it." Live on the plane of, "I can do it and I will get it," and before you know it, you'll be in the, "I can do it and I will get it" plane. And before you know it, you will feel the new vibrations manifesting in action, you will perceive them bringing results, you will be aware of a new point of view, you will understand that you belong to yourself. When you join the legion of, "I can do it and I will do it," you will feel better, act better, see better, and be better in every way. Fear is the father of worry, hatred, jealousy, malice, anger, discontent, failure, and all the rest. The person who gets rid of fear will find that the rest of the litter disappears. The only way to be free is to get rid of fear. Rip it up by the roots. I consider the conquest of fear as the most important step to be taken by those who wish to master the application of the power of thought. As long as fear dominates you, you will not be able to make progress in the realm of thought, and I must insist that you start working now to get rid of this obstacle. You can do it, if you try with determination. And once you have succeeded, life will seem totally different, you will feel happier, freer, stronger and more positive, and you will be more successful in all your endeavors in life. Start today, decide that this intruder must disappear, and make no compromise with him, and insist on absolute surrender on his part. You will find the task difficult at first, but each time you oppose him, you will weaken him, and you will become stronger. Stop feeding him, starve him, for he cannot live in an atmosphere of daring thoughts. So start filling your mind with bold, good, intense thoughts. Occupy yourself with thoughts of boldness, and fear will die of its own accord. Boldness is positive, fear is negative, and you can be sure that the positive will eventually prevail. As long as fear prowls around with its, "But, what if, I'm afraid, I can't, I'm afraid, I can't, and all the rest of its cowardly suggestions, you will not be able to use your power of thought to its full intensity. Once you get him out of the way, you can sail unhindered, and every inch of your sails will catch the wind. Fear is a Jonah, so throw it overboard. I recommend that you start doing some of the activities that you could do if you weren't afraid to try. Start working with them, continually affirming courage, and you will be surprised to find that a changed mental attitude will clear the obstacles out of your way, making things much easier than you could ever imagine. Exercises of this type will develop you, and you will feel much more gratified to see the results of a practice as simple as this. In front of you, you have many things waiting to be accomplished, which you could master, just by throwing off the yoke of fear, and refusing to accept its suggestions, boldly reaffirming the I and its power. And the best way to overcome fear is to assert your courage and stop thinking about fear. In this way, you will train the mind in new habits of thought, eradicating the old negative thoughts, which have been sinking and suppressing you. Carry the word courage with you as if it were your watchword, and manifest it in action. Remember that the only thing to fear is fear, and that you don't even have to fear fear, for it is at best a cowardly type, which will run away if you stand up to it. Chapter 6. the transmutation of the negative thought. Concern is the child of fear, so if you put an end to fear, worry will die for lack of nourishment. This advice is very old, but always worth repeating, because it is a lesson that we need to keep in mind at all times. Some people believe that if we kill fear and worry, we can never achieve anything. I have read editorials in major newspapers, in which there are writers who argue that without worry, one can never accomplish any of life's great tasks, because it is necessary to stimulate interest. That is nothing but nonsense, whoever says it. Worry never helped anyone to achieve anything. On the contrary, it stands as an obstacle in the way of achievement and accomplishment. The motive behind action and doing things is desire and interest. If you ardently desire something, you become very interested in its realization, and are willing to avail yourself of anything, which may help you to get what you want. In addition, your mind begins to work on the subconscious plane, making appear in the field of consciousness many valuable and important ideas. Desire and interest are the causes that lead to success. Worry is not desire. It is true that if the environment becomes intolerable, one will be driven by despair to make some efforts, which will result in the elimination of undesirable conditions, and the acquisition of others that harmonize more with the desire. But that is just another form of desire, like the person who longs for something other than what he has. And when his desire becomes sufficiently intense, all your interest is turned to its attainment, making a powerful effort and bringing about the change. However, it was not the concern that caused the effort. Worry could be content with waving your hands and groaning, "I am misfortune," thus exhausting the nerves without accomplishing anything. Desire acts in another way. It increases when the person's conditions become intolerable, and finally, when he feels the pain so intensely that he can no longer bear it, he says, "I can't take it anymore. I'm going to change." And that's what he does. Then the desire appears in action. The person keeps wishing for change in the worst way, even though in reality it is the best way, and when his interest and attention are turned to the task of liberation, he starts to get things moving. Worry never accomplishes anything. Worry is negative and pitiful. Desire and ambition are positive and vital. A person can worry ad infinitum, and yet still achieve nothing. But let that person transmute his worry and discontent into desire and interest, along with the belief that he is capable of bringing about change, the idea of, "I can do it and I will achieve it," and that is when things begin to happen. Yes, fear and worry must disappear before we can accomplish much. One must expel those negative intruders, and replace them with confidence and hope. Transmute worry into intense desire. Then you will find that interest is aroused, and you will begin to think things that are interesting to you. Thoughts will come to you from the great reservoir accumulated in your mind, and you will begin to manifest them in action. In addition, you will harmonize with similar thoughts of other people, attracting to you help and assistance from the great volume of thought waves that fills the world. One attracts to oneself thought waves, which correspond to the predominant thoughts in one's own mind, and to one's mental attitude. He also sets in motion the great law of attraction, by which he attracts to himself other people who could help him, and in turn, he is attracted to others who could be of help to him. This law of attraction is no joke, nor is it any metaphysical nonsense, but an important living and active principle of nature, as anyone can verify, through experimentation and observation. In order to succeed in anything that is strongly desired, the desire must be evident in order to attract it. He who has weak desires attracts very little. The more intense the desire, the greater the force that is put into operation. You must want something intensely enough before you can obtain it. You must want it more than anything else, and you must be willing to pay the required price. The price is to get rid of certain lesser desires, which stand in the way of the realization of the more intense one. Comforts, facilities, amusements, entertainments, and many other things must disappear, though not always. It all depends on what you want. As a rule, the greater the desire, the greater the price you will have to pay for it. Nature believes in adequate compensation. But if you really desire something with true ardor, you will pay the price without saying anything, because the desire will dwarf the importance of the rest. Do you say you want something intensely and do everything possible to get it? Bah! You only pretend to desire it. Do you desire it as much as a prisoner longs for freedom, as a dying man longs for life? Look at the almost miraculous things achieved by prisoners who longed for freedom. See how they strove to break through metal plates and stone walls with simple tools. Is your desire that intense? Do you strive to get what you desire as if your life depended on it? You are a fool. You don't know what desire is. I tell you that if a person wants something as badly as a prisoner desires freedom, or as someone very vital desires life, that person will be able to sweep away seemingly immovable obstacles and impediments. The key to realizing this is desire, confidence and will. This key opens many doors. Fear paralyzes desire, and frightens life. You must get rid of fear. There were times in my life when fear took hold of me, appropriating my vitality, and when I lost all hope, all interest, all ambition and desire. But, thanks to the Lord, I always managed to get rid of the monster's harassment, and face my difficulties like a man. And from then on, things began to be easier for me. Sometimes the difficulty would melt away, or I would be given the means to overcome it, avoid it or get around it. It is strange how all this works. No matter how great the difficulty, when we finally face it, with courage and self-confidence, we seem to bounce back, and then we wonder what we were so afraid of. It is not a mere fantasy, but the way a powerful law operates, which we do not fully understand, but which we can demonstrate at any time. There are people who often ask, "It is all very well for you new thinkers to say, don't worry about it. But what can a person do when he thinks of all the obstacles that can block his path and upset his plans?" Well, all I can say is, don't worry, but what can a person do when he thinks of all the obstacles that can block his path and upset his plans? Well, all I can say, is that person is committing stupidity, by worrying thinking about the problems, which may arise in the future. Most of the things we worry about, do not come to pass, just as a large proportion of the rest, come to us in a milder form than anticipated, and there are always other circumstances that appear at the same time, to help us overcome the problem. The future has not only difficulties in store for us to overcome, but also agents who will help us to overcome the difficulties. Things adjust themselves. We are prepared to face any problem that arises, and when the occasion arises, we always find a way to cope with it. God not only tempers the wind for the sheared ram, but he also tempers the sheared ram for the wind. The winds and the shearing do not come together. There is usually enough time for the ram to acclimatize, and then, it is back to wool, before the cold weather arrives. It has been said, and rightly so, that 9/10 of worries are about things that never happen, and that the other 10 are about things of little or no importance. So, what's the point of using up all your reserve strength by burdening yourself with future problems? It is better to wait to worry, when the problems will actually appear. You will find that having accumulated this energy, you will be able to cope with any kind of setback that comes your way. What is it that consumes all the energy in normal human beings? Is it the actual overcoming of difficulties, or the worry about supposed problems? We are always with tomorrow, and that tomorrow doesn't turn out to be that much of a problem. And that tomorrow does not turn out to be as terrible as we had imagined. Tomorrow is fine, it has both good and problematic aspects to it. When I stop to think about all those things I once feared would befall me, I can't help but laugh. Where is it all now? I don't know, and I've almost completely forgotten that I ever feared them. It is not necessary to fight against worry, for that is not the way to overcome that habit. Just practice concentration, and then learn to focus on something right in front of you, and then you will find that the worrying thought fades away. There are better ways to overcome objectionable thoughts than fighting them. Learn to concentrate on thoughts of an opposite character, and you will have solved the problem. When the mind is filled with thoughts of worry, it cannot find time to make plans that will benefit you. But when you concentrate on bright and helpful thoughts, you will find that it begins to work subconsciously, and when the occasion arises, you will discover all kinds of plans and methods by which you can meet the demands that come your way. Keep the right mental attitude, and everything will fall into place. Worrying is pointless, it has never solved anything, and it will never solve anything. Bright, cheerful, happy thoughts attract bright, cheerful, happy things, while worrying drives them away. Cultivate the right mental attitude. Chapter 7. The Law of Mental Control. Your thoughts are either faithful servants or tyrannical overlords, whatever you allow them to be. You have the say, so choose. Either they will go to work under the direction of a firm will, and doing all they can, not only during waking hours, but also when you sleep. Either our thoughts will go to work under the direction of a firm will, and doing all they can, not only during waking hours, but also when we sleep, since some of our best mental operations take place when our conscious mentality is at rest, as evidenced by the fact that when morning comes, we discover that there are troubling problems, which seem to have been solved during the night, after we had dismissed them from our minds, at least in appearance. Or else our thoughts will go up to us, and make us their slaves, if we are foolish enough to allow them to do so. More than half of the world's population are slaves to any erratic thought that seeks to torment them. You have been given your mind to use it well, not to use you. There are very few who seem to know this, and those who understand the art of controlling the mind. The key to this mystery is concentration. A little practice would develop in all human beings the power to use the mental machinery properly. When you have some mental task to perform, concentrate on it to the exclusion of all else, and you will find that the mind converges on it, on what has to be done, and that everything is quickly resolved. There is no friction, and all superfluous movement or waste of energy is obviated. All available energies are utilized, and every revolution of the mental steering wheel has an object. It pays to be a competent mental engineer. And the human being who knows how to direct his mental engine, also knows that one of the most important things, is to be able to stop when the work has been done. He does not keep pouring coal into the boiler, and keeping the pressure high once he has finished his work, or when the daily part of the job is done. He knows that the boilers have to be shut down until the next day. Some people act as if the engine should always continue to run, whether there is anything to do or not, and then complain that it wears out, and this and that needs to be repaired. Mental engines are stupendous machines, and what they require is intelligent care. To those who are familiar with the laws of mind control, it will seem absurd that there should be anyone who stays up all night worrying about the problems of the day, or more often, the problems of the future. It is as easy to slow down the mind as it is to slow down an engine, and thousands are learning to do so today, thanks to new thought. The best way to achieve this is to think about something else, as different as possible from the intrusive thought. It is useless to fight against an unacceptable thought, with the purpose of drowning it. It is a great waste of energy, and the more you say, "I won't think about it," the more it comes to your mind, for one is keeping it in front of you to beat it. Let it go, think no more about it, concentrate the mind on something else entirely, and keep the attention there, by an effort of the will. A little practice would do wonders in that direction. Attention can only concentrate on one thing at a time, so direct all your attention to one thought, and the others will slip away. Try it and see. Chapter 8. Reaffirming the Vital Force. I have already spoken of the advantages of getting rid of fear. Now I would like to introduce life into you. Many of you have lived as if you were dead, without ambition, energy, vitality, or interest. We are going nowhere. This is not a place where you can behave like the living dead. It is a place for people who are fully awake, active, alive, and what we need here is a good general awakening, although that would require, at the very least, a loud trumpet blast from Gabriel's fife. It seems that alone would wake up some people, who go around believing they are alive, but are actually dead, with respect to everything that makes life worthwhile. We must allow life to flow in us, and let it express itself naturally. You must not allow the little worries of everyday life, nor the big ones, to depress you and make you lose your vitality. Reaffirm the vital force within you, and manifest it in all your thoughts, acts and deeds, and before you know it you will be laughing, as well as full of vitality and energy. Put some life into your work, into your pleasures, into yourself. Stop doing things by halves, and start taking an interest in what you are doing, saying, and thinking. It's amazing how interesting the ordinary things of life can seem to us, just by being awake. We are surrounded by interesting things, they happen at every instant, but we will not be aware of them, unless we assert our life force, and begin to be truly alive, instead of merely existing. No man or woman has ever been anything unless they breathe life into their daily tasks, their actions, and their thoughts. What the world needs is living men and women. You have only to look into the eyes of those you know to discover how many of them are really alive. Most lack that expression of conscious life that distinguishes the living from the merely existing. I want you to acquire that sense of conscious life, so that you can manifest it in your life, and demonstrate what mental science has done for you. I want you to start working today, and begin to transform yourself according to the last guideline. You will be able to achieve it, if you put the proper interest in the task. Affirmation and exercise. Concentrate your mind on the thought that the I within you is much more alive, and that you fully manifest life, both mentally and physically. And keep that thought there, helping you by constant repetition of the slogan. Don't let that thought escape you, and always push it into the focus of the mind. Keep it in front of the mental vision as long as possible. Repeat the slogan when you wake up in the morning, and when you go to bed at night. Repeat it at mealtime, and whenever you can, throughout the day, at least once every hour. Form a mental image of yourself, full of life and energy. Measure yourself whenever possible. When you begin to perform a task, repeat, I am alive. Breathing as much life into the task as possible. If you feel a little depressed, say, I am alive, and then take a few deep breaths, and with each breath in, allow the mind to hold the thought that you are breathing in strength and life, and as you breathe out, hold the thought that you breathe out all the old, dead, negative states that you love to get rid of. Then end with a fiery and vigorous affirmation, I am alive, and meaning it. Allow your thoughts to take shape in action. Don't be content to repeat that you are alive, but prove it by your actions. Be interested in doing things, don't just sit on the moon and daydream. Get down to business and live. Chapter 9. To form the mind of habit. Professor William James, well-known professor and writer on psychology, says, quite rightly, the most important thing in all education is to make our nervous system an ally rather than an enemy. To do this we must do habitually and automatically, as soon as possible, as many useful actions as we can, and avoid with great care anything that might be harmful. In acquiring a new habit, or in letting go of an old one, it is necessary that we throw ourselves into it with as intense and determined an initiative as we possibly can. No exception should be allowed to happen, until the new habit is well rooted in life. Do not pass up the first opportunity, you have to act on all the resolutions you make, and any emotional impulses you may experience, in the direction of the habits, which you aspire to incorporate. This advice will be familiar to all students of mental science, for it treats the question, with far more simplicity than any of us. It inculcates in us the importance of transferring, to the subconscious mind the appropriate impulses, so that they become automatic, and a second skin. Our subconscious mentality is a great storehouse of all kinds of suggestions, both from ourselves and from others, and as it is the mind of habit, we must be careful and send him the right material, from which to create habits. If we get used to carry out certain activities, we can be sure that the subconscious mentality will make it easier for us to do the same thing over and over again, each time becoming easier, until in the end, we find ourselves firmly tied with the ropes and chains of the habit, and we find it more or less difficult, sometimes almost impossible, to free ourselves from this abhorrent thing. We have to cultivate good habits, for when the occasion comes to exercise them. The time will come when we will have to show our best efforts, and it depends on us right now, that when the need arises, we will be ready to do the right thing, automatically and almost without thinking, or else struggling to throw off the chains of the opposite of what we desire at that moment. We must be aware at all times, in order to avoid forming undesirable habits. It may not seem harmful to do a certain thing today, or it may not seem harmful tomorrow, but it may be very harmful to create the habit of doing that particular thing. If you were faced with the question, which of these two things should I do, the best answer is, I will do what I would like to become a habit for me. In shaping a new habit, or breaking an old one, we must undertake that work with the utmost enthusiasm, in order to gain as much ground as possible, before the energy expands, when it encounters the friction of opposing habits, already formed. We must begin by creating an impression, as intense as possible in the subconscious mentality. Then we have to be constantly on guard against the temptations that might arise to break the new resolution, just this once. This idea of just this once kills more good resolutions than any other cause. The moment one abandons oneself to just this once, one introduces a wedge which, in the end, can only be broken by a new resolution, just this once. A wedge is driven that will eventually break the resolution. Also very important is the fact that every time you resist temptation, the stronger your resolve becomes. Act on your resolve as soon and as often as possible, for with each manifestation of thought in action, the stronger it becomes. Each time you support it with an action, you are reinforcing the original resolution. The mind has been compared to a folded sheet of paper. From that moment on, it always has the tendency to fold along the same fold, unless we create a new fold, which will be the one to follow from then on. Folds are habits, and every time we make or create one, the mind finds it easier to fold through the same folds. We must have the right mental kinks. Chapter 10. The Psychology of Emotion. It is possible to think of emotions independently of habit. We can easily think, in acquiring habits of action, and even of thought, but we can also consider emotions, as something related to feeling and quite separate from intellectual effort. Nevertheless, and in spite of the distinction between the two depend largely on habit, and one can repress, increase, develop and change one's emotions, just as one can regulate habits, in the way one acts and looks at things. Psychology holds the following axiom. Emotions are deepened by repetition. If a person allows a certain feeling to take hold of him, he will find it easier to give in to that same emotion on a second occasion, and so on, until that particular emotion or feeling becomes a habit for him. If an undesirable emotion proves to be inclined to dwell permanently in you, the best thing to do is to start working to get rid of it, or at least to master it. And the best time to do this is at the beginning, because each repetition makes the habit more deeply rooted, and the task of displacing it more difficult. Have you ever been jealous? Have you ever been jealous? If so, you will remember how insidious its first approach was, and in what a subtle way it poured hateful suggestions into your willing ear, and how little by little, with the continuity of those suggestions, you finally ended up seeing, through the green prism of envy or jealousy. Envy has an effect on the bile, and poisons the blood. That is why it is associated with the color green. You will remember how it seemed to grow, to take possession of you until you could barely shake it off. The next time you found it easier to feel envious or jealous. It seemed to bring into your presence all sorts of objects, which apparently justified your suspicions and sensations. Everything seemed green, that fat green monster. And so it is with every sensation or emotion. If you abandon yourself to an attack of anger, it will be easier for you to feel angry the next time, in front of a minor provocation. The habit of feeling and acting meanly does not take long to take root in a new habitat, provided it is encouraged to do so. Worry is the great habit that tends to grow fat. People start worrying about important issues, and then they start worrying about pettiness. And then, the smallest trifle worries and disturbs them. They imagine that all sorts of fatal events are about to befall them. If they set out on a journey, they are sure that they will crash or be shipwrecked. If a telegram arrives, it undoubtedly contains horrible news. If a child seems to be a little calm, the worried mother thinks only that he will get sick and die. If the husband seems pensive, and turns some business over in his head, the good wife is convinced that he is beginning to stop loving her, and abandons herself to weeping. It's a never-ending story, worry, 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 and every time you give in to it, the stronger the habit becomes. After a short time, that continuous thought passes into action. Not only is the mind poisoned by these sad thoughts, but the forehead begins to show deep wrinkles between the eyebrows, and the voice takes on that raspy, plaintive tone so common among worried people. The state of mind known as critical is another fattening emotion. Is another emotion that fattens with exercise. First one finds fault with such and such, then with that, and finally with everything. The person becomes a chronic grumbler, a nuisance to friends and family. A nuisance to friends and family, as well as someone whom strangers prefer to avoid. Women can become great grumblers, but not because men are better, but simply because a grumpy man can get rid of the habit thanks to other men who will not put up with his silliness. He realizes that it does nothing but worsen his situation, and shakes off the habit, while a woman has more opportunities to recreate in it. For this continual grumbling is but a matter of habit. It is born and develops from a small seed, and every time one recreates in it, it takes another root, branch or tendril, becoming more and more entrenched in the one who has provided ground for it to grow. Envy, lack of generosity or gossip, are habits of this type. The seeds are dormant within all human beings, and only need a good soil, and a little watering, to gain vigor and strength. Every time you abandon yourself to those negative emotions, the easier it is for you to fall back into them, or others like them. Sometimes, by encouraging an unworthy emotion, it turns out that you are creating the conditions for the development of a whole family of these mental weeds. Now, here we are not giving an orthodox preaching against sin or evil thoughts. It is only to draw your attention to the law that underlies the psychology of emotion. It is nothing new, it is as old as the world, so old that many of us have forgotten it. If you wish to manifest those unpleasant and ungrateful traits continually, and suffer the unhappiness they bring, do not fail to do so. It is your business, and your right. It is none of my business, and I am not preaching to you, for I have enough to do, being attentive to my own undesirable habits and acts. I am only telling you about the law that regulates the matter, and it is up to you to do the rest. If you wish to eliminate these habits, it is convenient for you to know that you have at your disposal several ways to do it. For example, whenever you find yourself abandoning yourself to a negative thought or feeling, you should grab hold of it and say firmly, "Get out of here." At first it will not be so easy, and you will get the hair on the back of your neck, arch your back, and growl as if you were an offended cat. But don't worry, just say, "Get out of here." Next time he won't be so confident and aggressive, but will show a little fear. Each time you repress or stifle such a tendency, the weaker it will become, and the stronger you will be. Says Professor James. Refuse to express a passion and it will die. Count 10 before you express your anger, and then it will seem ridiculous to do so. Whistling for courage is not a mere figure of speech. On the other hand, sit all day in a dejected posture, sigh and answer everything that is said to you in a mournful voice, and you may be sure, your melancholy will not disappear. There is in moral education, no precept more valuable than this, as all who have experienced it testify. If we wish to conquer emotional tendencies in ourselves, we must devote ourselves in principle, assiduously and cold-bloodedly, to practice the opposite dispositions, to those we would prefer to cultivate. Relax your frown, lighten your gaze, contract your dorsal aspect instead of your ventral, speak in a higher tone, and pay a genial compliment. Your heart must be frigid indeed, if with all that it does not begin to thaw. Chapter 11. Developing New Brain Cells. I have already spoken of the plan for getting rid of undesirable sensitive states and expelling them. But there is a much better method, which is to cultivate the sensation or emotion directly opposite to the one you wish to eradicate. We are very capable of considering ourselves as a result of our emotions and sensations, believing that these sensations and emotions are us. However, that is far from being so. It is true that most of mankind is a slave to their emotions and sensations, and is very much dominated by them. Individuals believe that sensations are elements that direct us, and from which one cannot free oneself, therefore, they stop resisting. They yield to sensations without any hesitation, even though they may know that the emotion, or mental trait, is calculated to hurt them, causing unhappiness and failure, instead of happiness and success. They say to themselves, "We are made that way," and they believe it. The new psychology teaches people better things. It tells them that they are masters of their emotions and sensations, instead of their slaves. It teaches them that brain cells can be developed, which will manifest themselves in desirable tendencies, and that the old brain cells, which have manifested themselves in such unpleasant ways, can be added to the list of matters to be removed, leaving them to atrophy from lack of use. People can transform themselves, and change their whole nature. It is not a mere theory, but a palpable fact, already demonstrated by thousands of people, and increasingly attracting the attention of mankind. Whatever mental theory we support, we must admit that the brain is the organ and instrument of the mind, at least in our present state of existence, and that this is the way we should consider the brain. It is like a marvelous musical instrument, with millions of keys, with which we create innumerable combinations of sounds. We come into the world with certain tendencies, temperaments and predispositions. We can attribute these tendencies to heredity, or to theories of pre-existence, but the fact remains the same, it does not vary. Some keys seem to respond to our touch more easily than others. Some notes seem to react better to the passage of the current of circumstances on the strings. And others vibrate less easily. But we know that, unless we make an effort of will, to turn off the sound of some of those strings that sound so easily, it will end up being more difficult to make them sound, and it will not be so easy to vibrate to the sound of the circumstances. And if we take care of some of the other keys, which do not produce a clear note, it will not take long to tune them up, their notes will sound clear and vibrant, drowning out the less pleasant sounds. We have millions of brain cells, which we do not use, waiting for our care. We are used to deal with some of them, and with others we work non-stop. We can give some rest to those cells if we use others. The brain may seem to be trained and cultivated in an incredible way, to someone who has not looked into the matter. Mental attitudes can be acquired and cultivated, changed and discarded at will. There is no longer any excuse for people to manifest unpleasant or harmful mental states. We all have the remedy in our hands. We acquire habits of thought, feeling, and action through repeated use. We may be born with a tendency in a certain direction, or we may acquire tendencies through the suggestions of others, as well as from reading and listening to teachers and professors. We are a bundle of mental habits. Every time we abandon ourselves to a thought, or to an undesirable habit, the easier it is for us to repeat that thought, or action. Mental scientists are accustomed to speak of desirable thoughts, or positive mental attitudes, and of undesirable ones as positive, and undesirable ones as negative. There is a good reason for this. The mind instinctively recognizes certain things as good for the individual to which it belongs, and clears the way for those thoughts by putting up the least resistance to them. They have a much greater effect than an undesirable thought, so that one positive thought can neutralize several negative ones. The best way to overcome undesirable or negative thoughts, feelings, and emotions is to cultivate positive ones. Positive thinking is the strongest plant, and over time, will eventually expel the negative, by removing the food necessary for its existence. At the beginning, the negative thought will offer a vigorous resistance, of course, because it will be fighting for its survival. As it is said nowadays, it sees its end approaching, as long as it allows itself to grow. As long as the positive thought is allowed to grow and develop, and as a result, the person makes things difficult for it until it stops feeding it. The brain cells do not like to stay away as much as any other form of living energy, and they rebel and fight until they become so weak that they can no longer do so. The best method is to ignore these weeds of the mind, and spend as much time as possible watering the beautiful new plants in the garden of the mind, tending and caring for them. For example, if you tend to hate people, you can overcome that negative thought by cultivating love instead. Think of love, and manifest it as much as possible. Cultivate thoughts of benevolence, and act as kindly as you can with everyone you come in contact with. It will not be easy at first, but little by little love will overpower hatred, until hatred begins to wane and wither. If you tend toward sadness, cultivate a smile and a cheerful view of things. Insist on having the corners of your lips curved upward, and keep active, to see the good side of things. The diablos of sadness will rebel in your mind, but ignore them, and continue to cultivate optimism and joy. Let your motto be, bright, cheerful, and happy, and try to live up to it. And try to live up to it. These prescriptions may seem old and worn out, but they are psychological truths, and you can use them to your advantage. If you once understand the nature of this matter, you will understand and take advantage of affirmations and autosuggestions of various schools. By using this method you can become energetic, instead of sluggish, and active instead of lazy. New Thought people often have a lot to say about controlling thought, and indeed, it is necessary to control thought in order to get results. But something else is also needed. You must manifest the thought, until it becomes a habit in you. Thoughts take shape in action, in manifestation, and in turn, actions influence them. So by manifesting certain ways of looking at things, actions react upon the mind, increasing the development of the part of the mind, which is intimately related to that act. Each time the mind considers a thought, the easier the resulting action is, and each time an action is executed, the easier it becomes to harbor the corresponding thought. Chapter 13. The Great Dynamic Forces. You have already seen the difference between the successful and strong men in any walk of life, and the unsuccessful and weak around them. You are aware of the differences which characterize both classes, but you find it somewhat difficult to express wherein these differences lie. Let us study the question a little. Said Barton, "The longer I live, the more certain I am that the great difference between human beings, the weak and the powerful, the important and the insignificant, lies in energy and in an unshakable determination, to establish a purpose, and to go for it with life or death. This quality will achieve all that is possible to achieve in this world, and no talent, circumstance or opportunity will make a bipedal creature a man if he lacks it. Energy and unwavering determination, both will overcome mighty barriers, and the greatest obstacles. And yet they must be used together. Energy without determination is wasted. Many human beings have energy, which even overflows them, and yet they lack concentration, and lack the concentrated strength, which would undoubtedly enable them to drive their energy to the right place. Energy is not as scarce as many imagine it to be. I can look around me at any given moment and point to a few people I know who are full of energy, something that many of them seem to have plenty of, and yet, for some reason, they can't seem to make any progress. They do nothing but waste their energies. Now they are infatuated with one thing and then the next. They will occupy themselves with some trifling, uninteresting, unimportant matter, and waste energy and nervous strength to help them in their effort, but when they get through with it, it turns out that they have obtained nothing. Others who have plenty of energy, fail to direct the willpower to the desired end. Unwavering determination, those are the words. Don't you shudder at their strength? If you have something to do, get down to work and do it. Gather your energy, and then guide and direct it with your will, breathe into it that unshakable determination, and you will achieve what you want. Everyone has a gigantic will within them, but most of us are too lazy to use it. We can't get up enough courage to say sincerely, "I'll make it." If we could pluck up courage to that point, and then hold it so that it would not slip away from us, we would be able to lay hold of that wonderful power, the human will. Man has but a slight idea about the power of the will, but those who have studied the occult teachings know that the will is one of the great dynamic forces of the universe, and that if properly harnessed and directed, it is capable of achieving almost miraculous things. Unwavering energy and determination. Aren't they magnificent words? Engrave them in your memory, and impress them on the wax of your mind as if they were a seal, so that they become a constant inspiration to you, in your time of need. If you could get those words to vibrate in your being, you would be a giant among pygmies. Repeat them over and over again, and you will see how you find yourself full of new life, how your blood circulates, and how your nerves tingle. Make these words a part of yourself, and then return renewed to the battle of life, reanimated and strengthened. Put them into practice. Unwavering energy and determination. Let that become the motto of your daily life, and you will be one of the rare individuals capable of getting things done. Many people are repressed, and do not give the best of themselves, because they underestimate themselves, compared to those who succeed in life, or rather overestimate those who succeed, compared to themselves. One of the most curious things that can perceive those who have come into contact with people who have arrived, is that those people who have succeeded in life, or rather, overvalue those who have succeeded, compared to themselves. Is that those people who have succeeded are not extraordinary. When you meet some important writer, you feel somewhat disappointed, when you realize that it is someone very normal. He does not have a brilliant conversation, and in fact, you frequent a lot of ordinary people, who seem much brighter than this man, although he dazzled you with the light of his books. You meet a great statesman, and he doesn't seem, not half as wise as a lot of old men in your town, who waste their wisdom by throwing it up in the air. You meet an industrial magnate, and he doesn't give you the impression of having the shrewdness that some of the retailers in your neighborhood do. How is that possible? Is the fame of these characters fictitious, or what is the crux of the matter? The crux of the matter is this. You have imagined that these people were made of superior material, and you are disappointed to discover that they are made of the same stuff as you, and those around you. But you ask yourself, where does the greatness of their achievements lie? Mainly in the following: believing in themselves and their inherent power, in their ability to concentrate, in the task at hand when they are working, and in their ability to avoid energy leaks when they are not working. They believe in themselves, and make every effort pay off. The smart ones in your town pour their wisdom around corners, and talk to a lot of fools, whereas if they were really wise, they would save that wisdom, and place it where it would be of use. The brilliant writer does not waste his wit in the corners. In fact, he always closes the cupboard in which he keeps his wit, and only opens it when he is ready to concentrate and get down to work. The industrial magnate does not wish to impress you with his shrewdness and intelligence. He never did, even as a young man. While his peers did not stop talking and boasting, this future successful financier did not say this mouth is mine. The important people of the world, that is, those who have arrived, are not very different from you, or me, or the rest of us. Deep down we are all very much alike. You only have to meet them to realize how ordinary they are. But don't forget the fact that they know how to use the material at their disposal, while the rest of us don't, and in fact, even doubt that we have it. The man or woman who arrives begins to realize that he or she is not so different, after all, from the successful people you hear so much about. That gives them confidence, and the result is that they discover that they are capable of doing things. Then they learn to keep their mouths shut, and avoid wasting and dissipating their energy. They store energy and concentrate it on what they are doing, while their peers dissipate their energy in all directions, trying to show people how smart they are. The man or woman who gets there prefers to wait for the applause that follows achievement, and cares little for the praise that surrounds promises, for what he or she hopes to do someday, or to perform an exhibition of smartness, to no avail. One of the reasons why people who have dealings with successful people manifest success in turn, is that they are able to observe achievers and catch the trick of their greatness. They realize that the winner is an ordinary man, but that he totally believes in himself, and also that he does not waste energy, but reserves all his strength for the tasks that await him. And taking advantage of the example, they begin to put into practice in their own lives the lessons learned. What is the moral of this talk? Simply that you should not underestimate yourself, nor overestimate others. Understand that you are made of good stuff, and that inside your mind there are many good things. Then get to work and develop them, to extract something good from that good stuff. Get it by paying attention to what you have before you, and giving all of them the best of yourself, knowing that in you, there are many other good things, which will help you in everything that comes your way. Dedicate the best of yourself to the enterprise that occupies you, and do not cheat in the present task, for the sake of another that may appear in the distance. Your supply is inexhaustible. And don't waste your good dough on the multitude of onlookers, spectators, and critics around you watching what you do. Save your good dough for your task, and don't be in a hurry to receive the applause. Save your good thoughts for copying, if you are a writer. Save your good projects for putting them into practice, if you are in business. Save your wisdom for when the occasion calls for it, if you are a statesman. And in all cases, avoid the desire to show your cards to the crowd of onlookers, who are looking for a free show with which to entertain themselves. There is nothing lofty about this teaching, but it is just what many of you need. Stop fooling around and take things seriously. Stop spoiling the good in you, and start working on something worthwhile. Chapter 14. Claim what belongs to you. In a recent conversation, I was telling a woman to summon up the courage to go after something good, something she had been longing for many years, and which finally seemed to be within her reach. I told her that it gave the impression that her desire was about to be satisfied, and that the law of attraction was bringing it to her. But the woman lacked faith, and kept repeating, "Oh, it seems too good to be true. Too good for me." She had not outgrown the stage of feeling like a worm crawling in the dust, and although she had the promised land within her grasp, she refused to enter it because it was too good for her. I think I succeeded in whipping her up to step forward, for the last I know, she is now taking possession of it. I didn't want to talk to you about that, though. I wanted to draw your attention to the fact that there is nothing which is too good for you, however great it may be, or however unworthy you may seem. You are entitled to all the best, for that is your rightful inheritance. So do not be afraid to ask, demand, and take. The good things of the world are not the preserve of any favorite child. They belong to all, but they only come to those who are wise enough to recognize that they are theirs by right, and who are courageous enough to go after them. Many splendid things are lost because no one asks for them. They go to waste, and remain beyond your reach, because you feel that you are unworthy of them. They escape you because you lack the confidence and courage to demand them and take possession of them. None but the brave deserve beauty, says the old adage, and it is true in every sense of human endeavor. If you keep repeating to yourself that you are unworthy of something good, that it is too good for you, the law could apply to you, and you could end up believing what you say. This is a characteristic of the law: if you believe what you say, it takes you seriously. So be careful what you say, because it will believe it. Claim that you are worthy of the best there is, that there is nothing too good for you, and chances are, the law will take you seriously and say, I think he's right. I'm going to give you everything you want. You know your rights, so why deny it to you? However, if you insist on asserting, oh, he's too good for me, the law is likely to say to itself, I'm not sure it is, but he'll know. I'm sure he knows, and I'm not going to be the one to contradict him. Why is there nothing that should be too good for you? Have you ever stopped to think about what you are? You are a manifestation of the all, and you have a perfect right to everything that exists. Or, if you prefer it this way, you are a child of the infinite, and heir to everything. You will be telling the truth both ways. In either case, whatever you ask for, you are only demanding what is yours. And the more you ask for it, the more confidence you have in receiving it, the more you strive for it, the closer you will come to getting it. Intense desire, confident expectation, and courage in action is what gets you what is yours. But before you set these forces in motion, you must awaken to the realization that you are only asking for what belongs to you, and not for anything you have no right to claim. As long as there is even the slightest glimmer of doubt in your mind as to your right to the things you desire, you will be creating resistance to the operation of the law. You may ask as vigorously as you like, but you will lack the courage to take action if you maintain a shadow of doubt about your right to get what you desire. If you persist in regarding what you desire as belonging to someone else instead of to yourself, you will be adopting the posture of the envious or greedy, or even that of a thief. In that case, you will rebel and will not want to continue with the work, because instinctively, you will be repelled by the idea of taking what does not belong to you, because the mind is honest. But when you understand that the best of the universe belongs to you as divine heir, and that there is enough for everyone, without having to take it from anyone, then all friction disappears, the barrier falls, and the law carries out its task. I do not believe in humility. That meek and modest attitude does not appeal to me, it does not make any sense. The idea of making a virtue of these attitudes, when the human being is the heir of the universe, and has the right to everything necessary for his growth, happiness and satisfaction, seems to me absurd. I do not mean that it is necessary to adopt a boastful attitude and overwhelming. That would be absurd, because true strength does not come from showing off. The braggart is a self-confessed weak individual, he brags to hide his weakness. The truly strong person is serene, calm, and carries within him the consciousness of strength that makes bragging in supposed strength unnecessary. But it is necessary to move away from this hypnotism of humility, this meek and mild mental attitude. That meek and modest mental attitude. Remember the horrible example of Uriah Jip, and be very careful of imitating him. Throw your head back and look the world in the face. There is nothing to fear, the world can also fear you and shout at you. Be a man or a woman, and not a screaming object. And that can apply to your mental attitude as well as your outward behavior. Put an end to that crawling, wormy mental attitude. Stand up straight and look at life without fear, you will gradually become your ideal. There is nothing too good for you, nothing at all. The best of the best is not even good enough for you have much better things ahead of you. The best gift the world can give you is a mere trinket, compared to the great things that await your coming of age in the cosmos. So do not be afraid to throw yourself after all that, after the trinkets of this plane of consciousness. Go after them, catch a handful, play with them until you're sick of them. That's what they are made for. They are there for our exclusive use, not to look at them from afar, but to play with them, if we so desire. Help yourself, there are plenty of these toys waiting for your desires and demands. Don't be shy. I don't want to hear any more nonsense about things too good for you. Bah! You're like the emperor's little son, who thinks the tin soldiers and the toy drum were too good for him, and so he refused to accept them. But children are not always like that. Instinctively, they recognize that there is nothing that is too good for them. They want everything they have before them to play with, and they seem to feel that they are entitled to all things. And that is the mental condition, which we seekers engaged in the divine adventure must cultivate. Unless we are like little children, we cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. All that we see around us are the toys of God's nursery, toys that we use in our games. Help yourself, ask for them without any shame, and as many as you can use. They are all yours. And if you don't see what you want, just ask, because there is a large stock available on shelves and cabinets. Play, play, and play to your heart's content. Learn to weave mats, to build houses with bricks, to baste, play heartily and play well. And ask for all the materials you need to play. Don't be afraid, because there is something for everyone. But remember that, although all that is true, the best things are still nothing more than objects to play with, toys, bricks, mats, buckets and so on. They are useful, very useful for learning lessons, pleasant, very pleasant to play with, and desirable, very desirable for all those purposes. Have fun and make the most of all those things. Get into the game as far as you can and enjoy yourself. It's a good thing to do. But you must remember one thing, you must never overlook the fact that all those good things are but toys, part of the game, and you must be willing to put them aside when it is time to move on to the next class, to change grades, and not cry or complain, because you have to leave the toys behind. You should not get attached to them, because although they are for your use and enjoyment, they are not part of you, and are not essential for your happiness in the next stage. Do not despise them for their lack of sense of reality, for they are wonderful things relatively speaking, and you can enjoy them as much as you like. Don't be a spiritual prude, refusing to participate in the game. But don't get attached to toys either, which are good to use and play with, though not good enough to use you and become a toy in turn. Don't let toys reverse roles. There is a difference between being master of circumstances and being a slave to them. The slave believes that the toys are real, and that he is not good enough to deserve them. He only takes a few, because he is afraid to ask for more, and almost all the fun and amusement is lost. And then, considering that the toys are real, and not realizing that there are many more, he attaches himself to the trinkets that have come his way, becoming their slave. He is afraid that they will be taken away, and does not dare to crawl on the floor and go in search of others. The owner knows that he can ask for anything. He asks for what he needs day by day and does not worry about overloading himself. He knows that there is much more, and that he cannot be deprived of it. He plays, and plays well and has fun playing, and while playing he learns his nursery lessons. But he doesn't get too attached to toys. He is willing to let go of old toys, and reach out to pick up a new one. And when he is told that he has to move on to the next classroom, he drops the toys used that day on the floor, and with a twinkle in his eye and a confident mental attitude, he enters the new classroom in the great unknown, with a smile on his face. He is not frightened, for he hears the master's voice, and knows that he is there waiting for him, in the next great classroom. Chapter 15. Law, not chance. Some time ago I spoke to a man about the power of thought attraction. He told me that he did not believe that thought could attract anything to him, and that it was all a matter of luck. He told me that he had discovered that bad luck pursued him relentlessly, and that everything he touched went wrong. It had always been like that, it would always be like that, and he had become accustomed to it. When he undertook something new, he knew in advance that it would end badly, and that nothing good would come of it. For him, in the theory of thought attraction, there was no truth to it, it was all a matter of luck. This man did not realize that through his own confession, he was actually offering a most convincing argument in favor of the law of attraction. He was testifying that he always expected everything to go wrong, and that what he feared always ended up happening. It was a magnificent illustration of the law of attraction, but he did not know it, and there was no argument that could convince him. He was against it, and there was no way to make him change. And there was no way to make him change, he always expected bad luck, and every time he ended up being right. Nevertheless, for him, the position of mental science was nonsense. There are many people who seem to believe that the only way the law of attraction works is when you want it badly enough and continuously. They do not seem to realize that an intense belief is as effective as an intense desire. The successful man believes in himself and in his ultimate success, and regardless of minor setbacks, adversities, stumbles and slips, he rushes eagerly toward the goal, never ceasing to be sure that he will get there. His opinions and goals may undergo alterations as he goes along, and he may even change his plans, or have them changed, but all the time, deep in his heart, he knows that he will eventually get there. He does not continually wish he could get there, he simply feels it and believes it, and therefore, he sets in motion the most potent forces known in the world of thought. The man who also continually believes that he will fail will undoubtedly fail. How can he avoid it? It is no mystery. Everything he does, thinks, and says is tinged with the thought of failure. There are others who catch that spirit, and because of it, he has no confidence in himself or his abilities, which causes him to think that these are manifestations of his bad luck, instead of putting them down to his beliefs and expectations of failure. He spends all his time suggesting thoughts of failure to himself, and invariably suffers the effects of autosuggestion. Also in this case, through his negative thoughts, he is blocking that part of his mind, from which should come ideas and plans that would lead him to success, where only those who believe in him can access. Brilliant ideas do not come to us in a state of discouragement. Our minds work on ideas that we can use, only when we are enthusiastic and hopeful. Human beings instinctively sense the atmosphere of failure that hangs over some of their fellow human beings, and on the other hand, they recognize something in others that leads them to say, when they hear that a setback has befallen them, he will manage to get out of it. He cannot be sunk. It is the atmosphere caused by the prevailing mental attitude. Clean your mental atmosphere. There is no such thing as chance. The law sustains everything everywhere, because of its own way of operating. It is not possible to name a single thing that has happened by chance. Try to analyze the question to its ultimate consequences, and you will see that it is the result of the law. It is as evident as mathematics. Planning and purpose, cause and effect. From the movements of the worlds, to the growth of a mustard seed, everything is a result of the law. The fall of a rock down the side of a mountain does not happen by itself, but because there are forces that have been operating for centuries to provoke it. And behind these causes there are other causes, and so on until the causal cause is reached. And life is not the result of chance, but of the law. The law operates at full capacity whether you believe it or not. You can be the ignorant object upon which the law operates. Or you can align yourself with the operations of the law, get into its flow, so to speak, and thereafter life will appear to you as something quite different. You cannot get out of the law by saying that you have nothing to do with it. You have every right and liberty to oppose it, and to produce all the friction you wish, but that does not affect the law, and you can go along with it until you learn your lesson. The law of thought attraction is one of the names of the law, or rather one of its manifestations. I say again that your thoughts are real things. They go out from you in all directions, combining with other thoughts of like kind, with opposite thoughts of different character, forming combinations, going where they are attracted, away from opposite thought centers. Your mind attracts the thoughts emitted by others, whether consciously or unconsciously. But it attracts only those thoughts which are in tune with its own. In the thought world, like attracts like, and opposites repel. If you tune your mind to the keynote of courage, confidence, strength, and success, you will attract to you thoughts of a similar nature, people of a similar nature, and things that fit the mental melody. Your preponderant thoughts or mood determines what is attracted to you, so choose your mental partners. Today you are setting in motion currents of thought, which in time will attract to you other thoughts, people, and conditions, in harmony with the predominant tonality in your thinking. Your thought will mingle with that of others of like nature and mind, so that you will be attracted to each other, and most assuredly, sooner or later you will unite in a common purpose, unless one or the other changes the current of his thoughts. Accept the operations of the law. Integrate it into yourself. Enter into its flow. Keep your poise. Tune your mind to the key of courage, confidence, and success. Keep in touch with all such thoughts, which continually emanate from hundreds of minds. Take advantage of the best you can find in the world of thought. The best is there, so don't settle for less. Establish relationships with good minds. Follow the right vibrations. You must be tired of being continually shaken by the operations of the law, so harmonize with it.
As we conclude our journey through the wisdom of William Walker Atkinson, may the principles of the law of attraction continue to resonate within you, guiding your path towards boundless possibilities and infinite abundance. Remember, the universe conspires in favor of those who align their thoughts with their desires. May you manifest your dreams with unwavering faith and deliberate intention. Farewell, and may your life be filled with prosperity, joy, and fulfillment.